The alarm bells screamed through the corridors of the stellar dawn. Captain Veltar pressed his scaled fingers against the smooth control panel, his 4 eyes scanning the damage reports that kept flooding in. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in an angry glow. "Report," he said to his crew, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. Chief Engineer Crixnal looked up from her station, her tentacles moving quickly over the controls. "The quantum mines damaged our main drive, Captain. The explosion tore through 3 decks. We have hull breaches on levels 4 and 7. Veltar closed his eyes for a moment. The Zephyrian research mission had been going so well. They had discovered 2 new plant species on the moon they had just left. The data would have made their science council very happy. Now none of that mattered. "How long do we have?" he asked. Crixnal's skin changed from its normal blue to a worried purple. "Life support is failing. Maybe 6 days if we shut down all non-essential systems. The quantum drive is completely destroyed. We cannot move." The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of alarms. Veltar looked around at his crew of 12. They were all good people, scientists and explorers who had never hurt anyone. They did not deserve to die in the cold darkness of space. "Send the distress signal," Veltar ordered. "Full power. Maybe someone will hear us." Dr. Nythera, their medical officer, activated the emergency beacon. The message went out in all known languages, broadcasting their location and desperate situation to anyone who might be listening. Far away, Jake Martinez was having a very different kind of day. He sat in the pilot seat of his ship, the Lucky Strike, eating a sandwich that had seen better days. His boots were up on the console, and he was reading through salvage reports on his tablet. The Lucky Strike was not much to look at. Jake had bought the old freight hauler cheap and spent 3 years fixing it up. The hull was patched in several places, and the paint was fading, but the engines were solid and the sensors were military grade. Jake had made sure of that. He was a salvager, which meant he made his living finding valuable junk floating in space. Sometimes it was cargo from destroyed ships. Sometimes it was rare metals from asteroid crashes. It was not glamorous work, but it paid the bills and let him work alone. Jake had learned to like being alone after his time in the military. He had served on big ships with hundreds of crew members. There had been rules and orders and people telling him what to do every minute of every day. Now he could go where he wanted and work when he wanted. It was better this way. The sensor alarm chimed softly. Jake looked up from his tablet and saw a new signal on his screen. It was weak but steady. A distress beacon. He set down his sandwich and leaned forward. The signal was coming from about 6 hours away at full speed. Jake pulled up the details and whistled low. It was from a Zephyrian ship, and they were in real trouble. Jake had met Zephyrians before. They were quiet, peaceful people who loved science and learning. They reminded him of librarians, always polite and careful about everything. They did. They were not the kind of people who usually ended up in dangerous situations. He checked the timestamp on the signal. It had been broadcasting for 3 days. 3 days, and no one had answered. Jake was not surprised. The signal was coming from a dangerous part of space, near the edge of the stellar graveyard. That was a region full of dead stars and strange gravity fields that could tear a ship apart. Most captains would take one look at the location and decide it was too risky. Plus, Zephyrians were not exactly important in galactic politics. They kept to themselves and did not have much money or power. Helping them would not win anyone any favors or rewards. Jake stared at the signal for a long time. He had been planning to check out some wreckage from the recent war. The salvage job could pay for his ship repairs and food for the next 6 months. If he went to help the Zephyrians, he would lose that opportunity. He pulled up a star chart and traced the route to the alien ship. The path would take him through some nasty space, past gravity wells and radiation fields. His ship could handle it, but just barely. And if something went wrong, no one would come looking for him. Jake drummed his fingers on the console. The smart thing to do was ignore the signal and go after the salvage. The Zephyrians were probably dead already anyway. 3 days was a long time to wait for help that might never come. But Jake kept thinking about the 12 crew members on that ship. They were scientists, not soldiers. They had probably never been in a real fight or faced danger like this. They were sitting in the dark right now, watching their air run out, hoping someone would care enough to help them. He thought about his sister Lisa back on Earth. She was a teacher who worked with kids who had nowhere else to go. She always said that doing the right thing was not about what you got out of it. It was about what kind of person you chose to be. Jake sighed and reached for the navigation controls. Damn it, Lisa, he muttered to himself. He changed course toward the distress signal and pushed his engines to full power. The Lucky Strike shuddered as it picked up speed, heading toward the dangerous space where the Zephyrian ship was drifting. Jake opened a comm channel and recorded a message. This is Jake Martinez on the salvage ship Lucky Strike. I have received your distress signal and am heading to your location. Hang tight. Help is coming. He sent the message and leaned back in his chair. The smart money said he was making a huge mistake. The Zephyrians might be dead already. His ship might not survive the journey. He might end up floating in space himself, another casualty of trying to do the right thing. But as Jake watched the stars streak past his view screen, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like he was doing something that mattered. And maybe that was worth the risk. Jake stared at the navigation display, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The numbers were not good. The Zephyrian ship was drifting toward the stellar graveyard faster than he had thought. At their current speed, they would cross the point of no return in about 18 hours. He had been to the stellar graveyard once before, and that was enough. It was a place where dead stars went to die again. Black holes, neutron stars, and gravity fields that could stretch a ship like taffy. Nothing that went in ever came out. The Lucky Strike was still 6 hours away from the alien ship. Even if he pushed his engines past the red line, he would barely make it in time. And that was assuming everything went perfectly. Jake pulled up the alien ship's technical specs. The Stellar Dawn was a Zephyrian research vessel, about twice the size of his own ship. It had advanced science equipment and comfortable quarters for a crew of 12. What it did not have was weapons or heavy-duty engines. It was built for careful exploration, not emergency escapes. The distress signal gave him more details about their situation. Their main drive was completely destroyed. Life support was failing. They had maybe 5 days of air left, but that would not matter if they got pulled into the graveyard. Jake's comm system chimed. A message was coming in from the Zephyrian ship. He opened the channel and heard Captain Veltar's voice for the first time. This is Captain Veltar of the Stellar Dawn. We have received your message, Captain Martinez. We are very grateful that someone has answered our call. However, we must warn you that our situation is extremely dangerous. Our ship is caught in a gravity well that is pulling us toward the stellar graveyard. Any rescue attempt would put your own life at great risk. Jake smiled despite himself. Even when they were about to die, The Zephyrians were worried about putting someone else in danger. It was exactly the kind of thing his sister would do. He opened a return channel. "This is Jake Martinez. I understand the risks, Captain. I am still coming to get you. Can you give me a full status report?" There was a pause before Veltar responded. "Our quantum drive took a direct hit from an old mine. The explosion damaged our hull and knocked out most of our systems. We cannot maneuver at all. Chief Engineer Crixnell estimates we have approximately 17 hours before we cross into the graveyard's main gravity field." Jake did some quick math in his head. It would be close, but possible. "What about your crew? Any injuries?" "Doctor, Nithara reports that everyone is physically unharmed. However, our morale is quite low. My people have accepted that we are likely to die. We are not used to situations like this." That was another thing Jake knew about Zephyrians. They were logical and methodical, but they did not handle surprises well. When their careful plans fell apart, they tended to give up rather than fight. It was not cowardice. They just were not built for desperate situations. "Well, you are not dead yet," Jake said. "And I specialize in desperate situations. Just keep your people calm and let me worry about the rest." Jake closed the channel and got back to work. He pulled up everything he could find about Zephyrian ships and their construction. If he was going to save them, he needed to understand exactly what he was working with. The more he studied, the more impossible the rescue looked. The Stellar Dawn was too big and too heavy for his ship to tow directly. Even if he could attach a tow cable, his engines did not have enough power to pull them both out of the gravity well. There had to be another way. Jake had learned in the military that there was always another way if you were willing to think outside the rules. The trick was to stop looking at what you could not do and start focusing on what you could do. Jake's ship had magnetic grapples designed for grabbing onto salvage. They were strong enough to hold on to the alien ship, but could they handle the stress of a high-speed escape? Probably not, but maybe they did not have to. He started sketching out an idea on his tablet. Instead of trying to tow the alien ship directly, what if he used his own engines to change their trajectory? If he could push them just enough to alter their course, they might be able to use the gravity field itself to slingshot out of danger. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It would require split-second timing and a lot of luck. But it might work. Jake's comm system chimed again. This time it was not the Zephyrians. It was a message from Marcus Webb, the salvage dealer who had hired him for the original job. "Martinez, where the hell are you? My sensors show you heading away from the salvage site. You better not be thinking of backing out of our deal." Jake stared at the message for a long moment. Webb was offering him enough money to upgrade his ship and take a real vacation for the first time in years. All he had to do was ignore the alien distress signal and go collect some scrap metal. He thought about the Zephyrian crew, sitting in their damaged ship, watching the stars change as they drifted toward certain death. He thought about Captain Veltar trying to keep his people calm even though he knew they were doomed. He thought about Dr. Nithara, probably working around the clock to keep everyone healthy even though it would not matter in the end. Jake deleted Webb's message without answering it. He turned back to his tablet and started refining his rescue plan. The math was brutal. He would have to time everything perfectly. His engines would be running far beyond safe limits. One mistake, and both ships would end up as space junk. But Jake had been in worse situations before. He had flown combat missions, where the odds were even longer. The difference was that back then, he had been following orders. This time, he was choosing to take the risk. He opened the comm channel to the Stellar Dawn again. "Captain Veltar, this is Jake. I have a plan. To get you out of there, but I need to know something. How much do you trust me?" There was a long pause. Then Veltar's voice came back, steady and calm. "Captain Martinez, you are the only person in the galaxy who has even tried to help us. We trust you completely." Jake nodded, even though the alien could not see him. "Good, because this is going to get interesting." The Lucky Strike dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that rattled Jake's teeth. Through the view screen, he could see the Stellar Dawn tumbling slowly in the distance, its hull scarred and blackened from the mine explosion. Beyond the alien ship, space itself looked wrong. Stars were stretched into long lines, and patches of darkness moved like living things. The stellar graveyard was pulling them in. Jake's sensors screamed warnings as gravitational fields stronger than anything natural tugged at his ship. He fought the controls, using short bursts from his thrusters to stay on course. The Lucky Strike was built tough, but even she was struggling against forces that could crush planets. "Stellar Dawn, this is Lucky Strike," Jake called on the comm. "I am here." Captain Veltar's voice came back immediately, and Jake could hear the relief. "Captain Martinez, we cannot believe you actually came. Our sensors show that your ship is being affected by the gravity fields. You should leave before it is too late." Jake looked at his readings. The alien captain was right. The invisible hands of dead stars were already grabbing at his ship, trying to pull him into the graveyard. He had maybe 2 hours before his engines would not be strong enough to escape. "Not leaving without you," Jake said. "I need to get close enough to attach grapples. Can you stabilize your rotation?" "We will try," Veltar replied. Jake watched as small thrusters fired along the alien ship's hull, slowly stopping its tumble. It took several minutes, but finally the Stellar Dawn was holding steady. Jake could see the damage more clearly now. A huge hole had been torn in the ship's side, and several decks were open to space. He guided the Lucky Strike closer, fighting the gravity fields every meter of the way. His hands were sweating inside his gloves, and his ship's hull was starting to groan from the stress. When he was 50 meters away, he activated the magnetic grapples. The heavy cables shot out and locked onto the alien ship's hull with solid clanks that Jake felt through his deck plates. Warning lights immediately started flashing on his console. The Stellar Dawn was 3 times heavier than anything his grapples were designed to handle. "Connection established," Jake announced. "Everyone hang on. This is going to be rough." He pushed his engines to full power. The Lucky Strike screamed in protest as it tried to pull the much larger ship against the gravity well. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, both ships started to move. On the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, the Zephyrian crew watched their displays in amazement. Chief Engineer Crixinall's tentacles were moving rapidly over her controls as she tried to understand what was happening. "Captain," she said to Veltar, "the human ship is generating more thrust per unit mass than our computers say is possible. His engines should have exploded by now." Dr. Nythera looked up from her medical station. "Perhaps human engineering is more advanced than we thought?" Veltar shook his head, all 4 of his eyes focused on the tactical display. "It is not the engineering. It is the pilot. He is running his engines far beyond safe limits. He is risking his own life to save ours. The rescue was working, but slowly, too slowly. Jake's instruments showed that they were moving away from the graveyard, but barely faster than they were being pulled back in. At this rate, his engines would burn out long before they reached safety. Worse, the gravity fields were getting stronger. A neutron star somewhere in the graveyard was spinning faster, creating waves of twisted space-time that washed over both ships. Each wave made the Lucky Strike shudder and sparked alarms throughout both vessels. Jake's navigation computer started, throwing error messages as the gravity waves interfered with its calculations. Red warnings flashed across his screens faster than he could read them. The computer was designed to handle normal space, not the impossible physics of the stellar graveyard. "Computers crashing," Jake muttered, shutting down the automated systems. He would have to fly manually from now on. On the alien ship, the crew was watching their rescuer with growing amazement. Jake was doing calculations in his head that would challenge their best computers, adjusting thrust and direction by pure instinct. Every few seconds, he would fire thrusters or change engine power, somehow staying ahead of the gravity fields that should have crushed them both. "How is he doing that?" whispered Dr. Naithara. Crixinal's skin had turned from purple to a deep blue, the Zephyrian color for intense concentration. "I do not know. Our computers modeled these gravity fields using equations that take hours to solve. He is solving them in seconds, in his head." Veltar was beginning to understand something about humans that few aliens ever learned. They were not just aggressive or stubborn, they could think and adapt faster than almost any other species when they had to. Where a Zephyrian would stop to calculate the perfect solution, a human would find a good enough solution and act on it immediately. Another gravity wave hit, stronger than the others. Jake felt his ship twist as forces tried to tear it apart. Stress fractures appeared in the view screen, spiderwebbing across the transparent metal. His engines were running so hot that the temperature warnings had given up and just displayed solid red bars. "Hull integrity at 60%, he said into the comm. "How are you doing over there?" "We are holding together," Veltar replied. "Captain Martinez, your ship is taking terrible damage. Perhaps you should consider cutting the grapples and saving yourself." Jake almost laughed. "Not a chance, Captain. We are both getting out of this." But privately, Jake was starting to worry. His engines were beyond the red line and climbing toward the point where they would simply explode. His hull was developing new cracks every few minutes, and they were still only halfway to safety. He needed a new plan, something that would get them both out of the graveyard before his ship fell apart. As another gravity wave washed over them, Jake felt the Lucky Strike being pushed sideways. Most pilots would fight against the push, trying to maintain course. Jake had a different idea. Instead of fighting the gravity wave, he rode it. He adjusted his thrust to work with the wave instead of against it, using the stellar graveyard's own power to help push them towards safety. It was like surfing on invisible water, except the water could kill them both if he made one mistake. The Zephyrian crew watched in stunned silence as their ships suddenly accelerated, riding the gravity wave like a leaf on a river. It should have been impossible. Their computers could barely track what was happening, let alone predict it, but somehow the crazy human pilot was making it work. "Remarkable," Veltar whispered. "Absolutely remarkable." The Lucky Strike's engines screamed like wounded animals as Jake pushed them harder than they had ever been pushed before. Red warning lights bathed his cockpit in an angry glow, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. His ship was dying around him, but they were making progress. The stellar graveyard fought back with everything it had. Gravity waves crashed over both ships like ocean breakers, trying to drag them back into the darkness. Each wave made Jake's hull groan and his engines stutter. Cracks spread across his view screen like a spider web, and sparks flew from overloaded. "Control panels, status report," Jake called to the alien ship, his voice tight with concentration. Captain Veltar's reply was calm despite their desperate situation. "We are holding together, Captain Martinez. Our hull is intact, though we are reading severe stress on your vessel. Your engines are operating far beyond safe parameters." Jake glanced at his engine readouts and winced. The temperature was in the red zone and climbing. His navigation computer had given up completely, leaving him to fly by instinct alone. Every few seconds, he had to adjust thrust or change direction to ride the gravity waves, making split-second decisions that would determine whether they lived or died. On the Stellar Dawn's bridge, Chief Engineer Crixnall was studying the readings from Jake's ship with growing amazement. Her tentacles moved rapidly over her controls as she tried to understand what she was seeing. "Captain," she said to Veltar, "the human's engines should have exploded 10 minutes ago. The thermal stress alone should have melted his entire drive system. How is his ship still functioning?" Dr. Nythera looked up from her station, where she was monitoring both crews' life signs. "Perhaps their technology is more advanced than we thought?" Veltar studied the tactical display, watching Jake's ship somehow stay ahead of forces that should have crushed it. "It is not the technology. It is the pilot. He is doing things with that ship that should be impossible." Another massive gravity wave rolled toward them, larger than any they had faced. Jake saw it coming on his sensors and made a decision that would have seemed insane to any sane pilot. Instead of trying to fight the wave or avoid it, he aimed directly at it. "Hold on," he called to the alien ship. "This is going to be rough." The wave hit them like a hammer. Both ships shook violently as gravity fields stronger than a planet's pull tried to tear them apart. Jake felt his ship twist and flex, metal screaming under impossible stress. But instead of being crushed, they were flung forward like a stone from a slingshot. The Zephyrian crew held on as their ship was whipped through space faster than it had ever moved before. Their inertial dampeners struggled to keep up with the acceleration, and several crew members were thrown to the deck despite their safety harnesses. "Incredible," whispered Crixnall, watching the speed readings climb. "He used the gravity wave to accelerate us. But how did he know the exact angle and timing?" Jake was asking himself the same question. He was flying on pure instinct now, making decisions faster than thought. Every adjustment felt right, even though his logical mind said it should be impossible. It was like his ship had become part of his body, responding to his will without conscious control. But the stress was taking its toll. His main engine was running at temperatures that should have turned it into molten metal. Warning alarms screamed constantly, and smoke was starting to fill his cockpit. He could feel the Lucky Strike coming apart around him. "Engine temperature critical," he announced, more to himself than to the aliens. "Come on, baby, just a little further." The engine temperature climbed past every safety limit Jake had ever heard of. On his console, the red warning lights started, flickering and going dark as the circuits overheated. His backup systems were failing one by one, leaving him with only manual controls. That was when his main engine made a sound he had never heard before. A deep, grinding noise that seemed to come from the ship's very bones. Jake knew that sound. It was the sound of metal reaching its breaking point. "Engine failure imminent," he called to the Stellar Dawn. "I am going to lose thrust in about 30 seconds. Captain Veltar's voice came back immediately. "Captain, Martinez, you must save yourself. Cut the grapples and use your remaining power to escape." Jake looked at his instruments. Veltar was right. If he cut the alien ship loose right now, he might have just enough power to get his own ship to safety. The Zephyrians would be doomed, but at least one ship would survive. "Not happening," Jake said firmly. "We are all getting out of this together." Instead, of cutting the grapples, Jake did something that made the alien crew gasp in disbelief. He transferred all power from his life support systems to his engines. His air recyclers shut down, his heat systems went offline, and his artificial gravity failed. He now had maybe 10 minutes of breathable air, but his engines got one last surge of power. On the stellar dawn, Dr. Nithara was staring at her instruments in shock. "Captain, the human just shut down his life support. He has sacrificed his own air to give us more thrust." The Zephyrian crew fell silent. They had never encountered such reckless bravery. In their culture, self-sacrifice was reserved for the most extreme circumstances, and even then, it was done only after careful consideration of all alternatives. Jake had made the decision in seconds, without hesitation. The extra power worked. Both ships surged forward as Jake's engines gave everything they had left. They were almost clear of the graveyard now, almost to the point where normal space resumed and the deadly gravity fields weakened. But Jake's air was running out fast. In the airless cockpit, frost was forming on his breath as the temperature dropped. He could feel his lungs burning as the oxygen grew thin. Black spots started appearing at the edges of his vision. "Almost there," he whispered, fighting to stay conscious. Almost there. His engines chose that moment to finally give up. With a sound like thunder, the main drive shut down completely. Emergency systems triggered, venting superheated plasma into space to prevent an explosion. The Lucky Strike went dead in space, its hull cracked, and its systems dark. But it had been enough. The momentum Jake had built up carried both ships past the edge of the stellar graveyard's main gravity field. They were still being pulled back, but slowly now, gently. They had reached the point where rescue ships could safely approach. Jake slumped in his pilot seat, barely conscious. The air in his cockpit was almost gone, and the cold was seeping into his bones. His ship was a wreck, his engines were destroyed, and his life support was dead. But the Zephyrians were alive. 12 innocent scientists who had never hurt anyone would get to go home to their families. That had to count for something. As darkness closed in around him, Jake smiled. His sister would be proud. Jake's eyes snapped open as his ship's emergency alarm cut through the darkness. For a moment, he could not remember where he was. His cockpit was dark and cold, frost covering every surface. Then the memories came flooding back. The rescue, the gravity waves, the engine failure. He was still alive somehow. The Lucky Strike's emergency oxygen reserves had kicked in automatically, giving him a few more precious minutes of air. But his ship was completely dead, drifting in space like a piece of junk. Through his cracked view screen, he could see the stellar dawn nearby. The alien ship's lights were still on, which meant their systems were working. That was good news, at least. Jake tried to call them on his comm system, but nothing happened. His communications were as dead as everything else. He would have to wait for them to contact him. He did not have to wait long. A light flashed on his emergency beacon. Someone was trying to dock with his ship. Jake looked out and saw a small shuttle approaching from the alien vessel. It locked onto his airlock with a soft thud that he felt through the deck. The airlock cycled, and Jake heard voices speaking in the musical language of the Zephyrians. Then the inner door opened, and Captain Veltar stepped through, followed by Dr. Nithara and Chief Engineer Crixnall. Jake had never seen Zephyrians up close before. They were taller than humans, with blue-scaled skin and 4 large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Their movements were graceful and precise, like dancers. Captain Martinez, Veltar said in accented but clear English. We are very pleased to see that you are alive. Jake tried to stand up, but his legs were shaky from the cold and lack of oxygen. Dr. Nythera immediately moved to help him, her scanner already reading his vital signs. You are suffering from oxygen deprivation and hypothermia, she said, her voice gentle but concerned. We need to get you to our medical bay immediately. My ship, Jake managed to say. Is it salvageable? Crixnell was already examining his control panels with her scanner. Her tentacles moved over the damaged systems with expert precision. After a few minutes, she looked up and shook her head sadly. I am sorry, Captain. Your engines are completely destroyed. Your life support systems are beyond repair. Your ship cannot be saved. Jake felt a stab of loss. The Lucky Strike had been his home for 5 years. She was not much to look at, but she had taken him to dozens of worlds and kept him safe through asteroid fields and plasma storms. Now, she was just a floating wreck. However, Crixnell continued, your sacrifice has saved all of our lives. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. The Zephyrians helped Jake to their shuttle and brought him aboard the Stellar Dawn. The alien ship was surprisingly comfortable, with soft lighting and smooth corridors that curved in gentle arcs. Everything was clean and organized, very different from the rough industrial look of human ships. Dr. Nythera took Jake to the medical bay, where she treated his injuries with equipment that seemed to work like magic. A scanner that healed cuts, just by passing over them, a breathing mask that somehow restored his oxygen-starved blood in minutes. Within an hour, Jake felt better than he had in years. Your medical technology is incredible, he told the doctor as she finished her work. Nythera's skin shifted to a pleased shade of green. We have always focused on healing rather than fighting. It is good to know that our skills can help those who risk themselves for others. Captain Veltar appeared in the doorway of the medical bay. Captain Martinez, when you are feeling better, would you join me on the bridge? We have much to discuss. Jake followed the alien captain through the ship, marveling at the advanced technology around him. Everything was controlled by thought and gesture rather than buttons and switches. The walls themselves seemed to be alive, glowing softly and responding to the crew's presence. The bridge was a circular room with stations arranged around a central display showing their current position. Jake was relieved to see that they were well clear of the stellar graveyard, drifting in relatively safe space. We have been monitoring galactic communications, Veltar explained. News of our rescue is already spreading. It seems that you have become something of a celebrity, Captain Martinez, Jake groaned. I just did what anyone would do. Crixnell looked up from her engineering station, her 4 eyes blinking in what Jake was learning was the Zephyrian equivalent of surprise. Captain, forgive me, but that is not true. We monitored 37 other ships during our distress call. None of them even changed course to investigate. You were the only one who came. The words hit Jake harder than he expected. He had assumed that other ships had tried to help and failed, or that they simply had not heard the distress call. The idea that he had been the only one to even try was somehow both humbling and disturbing. Why? He asked. Why did no one else help you? Veltar's skin darkened to a sad blue. Our people have little political influence in the galaxy. We are peaceful researchers with no military power and few trade connections. Helping us would gain no rewards or favors. Most captains would consider it a poor business decision. Dr. Nithara spoke up from her station. Also, the rescue was extremely dangerous. A logical analysis would conclude that the risk to the rescuer was greater than the chance of success. Most species would not attempt such a mission. Jake shook his head. That is cold. It is practical, Veltar said gently. We do not blame them. In their position, we might make the same choice. Zephyrians are not known for taking great risks. That made Jake curious. Then how did you end up in this situation? Your ship is built for exploration, not military operations. Crixnall answered, her tentacles gesturing to the star charts around them. We were studying the effects of stellar collapse on local space-time. Our mission was supposed to be perfectly safe. We were staying well away from dangerous areas. We did not know about the old minefield. The mines were left over from the frontier wars, Veltar added. They were supposed to have been cleared years ago, but some were missed. We were simply unlucky. Jake studied the aliens around him. They were obviously intelligent and capable, but they approached problems very differently than humans did. Where a human crew might have tried desperate repair attempts or risky escape plans, the Zephyrians had simply accepted their fate and waited for help that might never come. What will you do now? Jake asked. We will return to our home world and report our findings, Veltar said. But first we must find a way to repair our ship. Our quantum drive is destroyed, and we do not have the materials for a replacement. Crixnall brought up a technical display showing the damaged engine. We can jury-rig a conventional drive from our spare parts, but it will take several days and will only give us very limited range. We will need to find a repair facility. Jake studied the display, his mind already working on the problem. He might not have a ship anymore, but he still had his knowledge of spacecraft repair and his contacts in the salvage business. I might be able to help with that, he said. I know people who can get you the parts you need, and I have some experience with unconventional repairs. The Zephyrian crew looked at each other with surprise. Veltar spoke for all of them. Captain? Martinez, you have already done more than enough. You risked your life and lost your ship to save us. We cannot ask you to do more. Jake smiled. You are not asking. I am offering. Besides, I do not have anywhere else to go right now. Dr. Nithara's skin shifted to the warm green of happiness. Then we would be honored to have your help. As Jake began working with the Zephyrian engineers, he realized something interesting was happening. The aliens were incredibly knowledgeable about theory and advanced technology, but they struggled with the kind of improvised, hands-on repairs that came naturally to humans. Meanwhile, Jake was learning things about spacecraft design that human engineers had never dreamed of. It was the beginning of something neither species had expected, a partnership that would benefit them both. 3 days later, Jake found himself elbow-deep in Zephyrian technology, trying to make sense of engine components that seemed to work on principles human science had never discovered. The alien ship's repair bay was filled with parts that glowed, softly and hummed with their own internal energy. Hand me that quantum resonator, Jake called to Crixnall, who was working beside him on the makeshift engine assembly. The Zephyrian engineer passed him a device that looked like a crystal flower and weighed almost nothing. Are you certain this will work, Captain Martinez? We are combining technologies that were never meant to operate together. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. That is what makes it interesting. Your people think, too, much about the right way to do things. Sometimes you have to use the wrong way that actually works. It had been an educational few days for both species. The Zephyrians were amazed by Jake's willingness to try solutions that their computers said were impossible. Jake was equally impressed by the aliens' deep understanding of physics and their incredibly advanced materials. The problem was that Zephyrian technology was designed to work perfectly under ideal conditions. When something broke, their first instinct was to replace it with an exact duplicate. Human technology, on the other hand, was built to be fixed with whatever was available. This should not function, Dr. Nythera said, studying Jake's latest modification to their life support system. You have bypassed 3 safety systems and used components from our food processors to regulate airflow. Jake grinned. But it does work. That is what matters. Captain Veltar watched the cooperation between his crew and the human with growing fascination. In just 3 days, Jake had taught them more about practical engineering than they had learned in years of formal education. Meanwhile, his crew was sharing knowledge of advanced physics that could revolutionize human technology. Captain Martinez, Veltar said, approaching the work area. We have received a message from our government. They are very interested in meeting you. Jake looked up from the engine components. Why? Word of the rescue has reached our home world. The idea that a single human risked everything to save Zephyrian lives has caused quite a stir. Our people are not used to such gestures from other species. Crixnall paused in her work, her tentacles still for once. Captain, you must understand that most aliens see us as weak and passive. We are often ignored in galactic politics because we avoid conflict and prefer study to action. What you did shows that humans value Zephyrian lives as much as your own. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what seemed right. That is exactly why it matters, Dr. Nythera said softly. You did not calculate profit or political advantage. You simply saw people in danger and helped them. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the bridge. Captain Veltar hurried to answer it, returning a few minutes later with a worried expression. We have a problem, he announced. Our communications officer has been monitoring human emergency channels. There is a damaged cargo ship about 6 hours from here. They are not in immediate danger, but they need assistance with repairs. Jake straightened up, already reaching for his tools. What kind of assistance? Engine problems. They are stranded but not in distress. A routine rescue operation. Veltar paused, studying Jake's face. The interesting thing is that there are at least 5 human ships closer to them than we are, but none of them have responded to the call for help. Jake frowned. That does not make sense. Humans always help other humans in space. Crixnall brought up the communication logs on a portable display. According to the cargo ship's messages, the other vessels are all commercial or military ships with schedules to keep. They have acknowledged the call, but stated that they cannot afford the delay. Jake read through the messages, his frown deepening. The cargo ship was not in immediate danger, which meant that technically no one was required to help them. But they would be stranded for weeks, waiting for an official rescue ship to reach them. This is different from our situation, Dr. Nythera observed. We were facing certain death. This ship simply needs assistance. Perhaps that explains the lack of response. But Jake was thinking about something else. He was thinking about how alone he had felt when he made the decision to rescue the Zephyrians. He had assumed he was the only ship in range, that no one else could help. Learning that 37 other vessels had ignored the distress call made him angry and sad at the same time. Captain Veltar, Jake said slowly, how is your engine repair coming along? We have basic propulsion restored thanks to your modifications. We could reach the cargo ship. but we do not have the proper equipment to help with human technology repairs. Jake smiled. I do. And I bet they have some of the parts we need to finish fixing your quantum drive. The Zephyrian captain's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. You want to help them? We are going to help them, Jake corrected. All of us, together. 2 hours later, the Stellar Dawn limped through space toward the stranded cargo vessel. The alien ship's new hybrid drive system worked better than anyone had expected, combining Zephyrian efficiency with human adaptability. Jake was on the bridge, working with the communications officer to contact the cargo ship. When the human captain appeared on screen, his relief was obvious. Thank God, Captain Rodriguez said. I was beginning to think we would be stuck here forever, though I have to admit, I was not expecting help from a Zephyrian ship. We heard your call and thought we could assist, Jake replied. I am Jake Martinez, and I have some experience with engine repairs. Rodriguez's expression changed when he heard the name. Martinez? Are you the guy who just rescued those aliens from the stellar graveyard? The story is all over the news feeds. Jake felt his cheeks redden. I just did what needed doing. Well, thank you for doing it again. We have been broadcasting for 8 hours, and you are the first ship to actually respond. As the Stellar Dawn approached the cargo vessel, Jake could see the problem immediately. One of their engine nacelles had been damaged, probably by space debris. It was not life-threatening, but it would require external repairs that the cargo ship's crew could not perform safely. This is going to require some creative solutions, Jake told Captain Veltar. Human ships are built very differently from yours. But the Zephyrian crew was ready for the challenge. Dr. Nithara had prepared a medical team in case anyone was injured. Crixnall had assembled a kit of tools and components that could be adapted for human technology. Even the ship's science team had volunteered to help. As they began the complex docking procedure, Jake realized something important was happening. The Zephyrians were not just helping because they owed him a debt. They were helping because they had learned something from him about what it meant to answer a call for help. Captain Martinez, Veltar said as they prepared to board the cargo ship, I believe this is what you humans call paying it forward. Jake nodded, checking his toolkit one more time. Something like that. Ready to show the galaxy what we can. Do when we work together? The Zephyrian captain's skin shifted to the bright blue of determination. Ready, Captain. The cargo ship Iron Horse was exactly what Jake expected from a human freight hauler, functional, tough, and showing the wear of years in space. Captain Rodriguez met them at the airlock, a weathered man with grease-stained coveralls and grateful eyes. I cannot believe you actually came, Rodriguez said, shaking Jake's hand firmly. When I saw a Zephyrian ship on approach, I thought my sensors were malfunctioning. Jake gestured to his alien companions. Captain Rodriguez, meet Captain Veltar and his crew. They are the best engineers I have ever worked with. Rodriguez looked skeptical as he studied the graceful blue-skinned aliens. No offense, but Zephyrians are not exactly known for hands-on repair work. That was before they met Jake, Dr. Nithara said with a slight smile. He has taught us much about practical solutions. The damage to the Iron Horse was worse than it had looked from outside. The engine nacelle had been cracked by an asteroid impact, and several critical components were completely destroyed. Rodriguez led them through the ship's cramped corridors to the engine room, where his small crew was waiting nervously. This is Chief Engineer Murphy and Systems Specialist Davis, Rodriguez said, introducing his people. We have been trying to fix this mess for 6 hours with no luck. Murphy, a small woman with calloused hands, pointed to the damaged engine. The primary plasma conduit is cracked, and the magnetic containment field is unstable. We have the parts to fix it, but we cannot shut down the engine safely. If we lose magnetic containment while we are working, the plasma will fry everything within 50 meters. Jake studied the problem while Crixinal scanned the damaged systems with her instruments. The Zephyrian engineer's tentacles moved rapidly as she processed the data. "The human engine design is very different from ours," she said to Jake, "but I believe I understand the issue. The magnetic field is unstable because the control matrix is damaged. If we could regulate it externally while you make repairs—" "Can you do that?" Jake asked. Crixinal's skin shifted to a confident green. "Our ships use similar magnetic containment, just more advanced. I can create a stabilizing field using our portable generators." Murphy looked doubtful. "Are you sure? If that field fails while we are inside the engine compartment, we will be vaporized instantly." Dr. Nithara stepped forward. "Chief Murphy, may I explain something about Zephyrian engineering philosophy? We design our systems to fail safely, not efficiently. Our magnetic containment has 17 backup systems and has never failed in over 200 years of use." Jake could see that the human crew was still nervous, so he made the decision for them. "I will go in first. If Crixinal's field holds for me, then we know it is safe for everyone else." "Jake, no," Captain Veltar protested. "If anything goes wrong—" "Then I will be the only one at risk," Jake interrupted. "This is my call." Rodriguez looked between the human and alien crews, seeing something he had never witnessed before, two different species working together as a single team. "All right, Martinez, but at the first sign of trouble, you get out of there." Crixinal spent 30 minutes setting up her magnetic field generators around the damaged engine. The devices looked like small silver trees, their branches humming, with energy as they created invisible barriers to contain the deadly plasma. "Field is stable," she announced. "Jake, you now have a safety margin of approximately 300% over normal human standards." Jake suited up and entered the engine compartment, his heart racing despite his confidence in the alien. Technology. The damaged plasma conduit glowed like a small sun, contained only by the shimmering magnetic fields that Crixinal was maintaining. Working carefully, Jake began replacing the damaged components. His movements were quick and efficient, guided by years of experience with human technology, but every few minutes, he would call out to Crixinal for adjustments to the magnetic field, and she would respond instantly, fine-tuning the containment with precision that amazed the human crew. "How is she doing that?" Murphy whispered to Dr. Nithara. "She is controlling the field to within microseconds, compensating for every tiny change in plasma pressure." The Zephyrian doctor watched her colleague work with obvious pride. Crixinal has spent 50 years studying magnetic containment systems. For her, this is like asking a musician to play a simple song. As Jake worked, he found himself learning new techniques from watching how the aliens approached problems. Where he would use brute force and quick fixes, they would find elegant solutions that worked better and lasted longer. Where they would hesitate and calculate, he would make instant decisions that kept the work moving forward. "Try routing the power through the secondary manifold," Veltar suggested when Jake ran into a particularly stubborn problem. "That is not how human engines work," Murphy protested. Jake paused, thinking about it. "Actually, it might work if we modify the flow rate. Crixinal, can you adjust the magnetic field to handle a different plasma configuration?" "Of course," the engineer replied. "Adjusting now." The modification worked perfectly, solving a problem that had been stumping the human crew for hours. Murphy stared at the readouts in amazement. "That should not be possible," she said. You just made our engine more efficient than the original design. Dr. Nythera smiled. This is what we have learned from working with Jake. Sometimes the best solution is not the one in the manual. 3 hours later, the Iron Horse's engine was not only repaired but improved. Jake had incorporated several Zephyrian design concepts that made the system more stable and efficient. Meanwhile, the alien crew had learned practical techniques for field repairs that would serve them well in the future. Captain Rodriguez could not stop grinning as he watched his engine readings. This is incredible. We are getting 15% better efficiency than before the damage. That is what happens when you combine human ingenuity with Zephyrian precision, Jake said, cleaning his tools. As they prepared to leave the cargo ship, Rodriguez pulled Jake aside. Martinez, I owe you more than I can ever repay, but I have to ask, why did you come? Your alien friends, I understand. They owe you for the rescue. But you could have just stayed on their ship and headed home. Jake thought about the question for a moment. A few days ago, I learned that I was the only person in the galaxy who answered a distress call. 37 other ships just ignored it and kept going. I do not want to live in a galaxy like that. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I hear you, brother. And for what it is worth, your story has been all over the news feeds. People are talking about what it means to help strangers. Maybe things will change. As the Stellar Dawn prepared to depart, Captain Veltar called Jake to the bridge. We have received another message from our government. They are offering you full citizenship and a position as a cultural liaison between our peoples. Jake was surprised. Why would they want that? Because you have shown us something we had forgotten, Veltar replied. That courage and compassion can bridge any gap between species. Our scientists are excited about the possibilities for cooperation. Dr. Nythera brought up a display showing dozens of news reports from across the galaxy. The story of the rescue has spread to many worlds. Some species are reconsidering their policies about helping strangers in space. Crixnall looked up from her engineering station. Jake, we have also received requests for technical consultations from human colonies. It seems they are very interested in our engine modifications. Jake looked around at the alien crew that had become his friends. So what happens now? Now, Captain Veltar said with a smile, we go home, together, and we see what other impossible things we can accomplish when we work as one. As the Stellar Dawn jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake realized that losing his ship had been the best thing that ever happened to him. He had found something more valuable than any salvage contract. He had found a purpose worth fighting for. 6 months later, Jake Martinez stood on the observation deck of the new Zephyrian Human Research Station, watching cargo ships dock with supplies from a dozen different worlds. The station was built in the space where the Stellar Dawn had nearly died, transformed from a dangerous region into a beacon of hope for stranded travelers. Hard to believe this place was trying to kill us not too long ago, Jake said to Captain Veltar, who had joined him at the observation window. The Zephyrian captain's skin was a contented blue as he watched the busy traffic. The stellar graveyard has been stabilized using combined human and Zephyrian technology. It is now one of the safest shipping lanes in this sector. Jake smiled at the irony. The place that had nearly claimed 2 ships was now saving others. The research station served as both a scientific outpost and an emergency rescue facility, staffed by volunteers from multiple species who had been inspired by the story of the rescue. Captain Martinez, Dr. Nythera's voice came over the intercom. We are receiving a distress signal from Sector 7. A Kralix freighter has suffered engine failure. Jake was already moving toward the bridge before she finished speaking. On my way. The Rescue Operations Center was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human-built rescue ships equipped with Zephyrian. Technology could reach disabled vessels faster and safer than either species could have managed alone. The center's crew included humans, Zephyrians, and several other species who had volunteered to help. "What is the situation?" Jake asked as he entered the center. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, a former military pilot who had joined the station after hearing about Jake's rescue, brought up the tactical display. Krallick's freighter Prophet's Edge lost their main drive about an hour ago. They are not in immediate danger, but they are carrying medical supplies for a colony outbreak. Jake studied the readings. The Krallicks were a practical species, not known for taking unnecessary risks. If they were calling for help, they really needed it. "How many rescue ships are in range?" he asked. "Ours and one other," Kim replied. "But get this. There are 6 commercial vessels closer to them. 3 human, 2 Altarian, and 1 Zephyrian. All of them have acknowledged the call." Jake raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" "All of them," Kim confirmed with a smile. "The human ships are already changing course to assist. The Altarians are offering emergency supplies. Even the Zephyrian vessel is heading to help, and they are not even equipped for rescue operations." Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. This was what he had hoped for, a galaxy where helping strangers was normal, not exceptional. "Looks like we are not needed this time," he said. "But let us monitor the situation anyway." As they watched, the rescue played out exactly as Kim had described. Multiple ships converged on the disabled freighter, working together to get it moving again. The whole operation took less than 3 hours, and everyone involved seemed to consider it routine. 6 months ago, that freighter would have been stranded for days, Veltar observed. The change has been remarkable. The change had been more than remarkable. It had been galaxy-wide. The story of Jake's rescue had spread through news networks, social media, and word of mouth until it became legend. More importantly, it had inspired real action. Several governments had changed their policies to encourage rescue operations. The Galactic Commerce Guild had started offering insurance discounts to ships that participated in rescues. Even the military had begun, including rescue protocols in their standard training. But the most significant change was cultural. Helping strangers in space had become something that earned respect rather than suspicion. Young pilots competed to see who could assist the most distressed vessels. Rescue operations were featured in entertainment shows as heroic adventures rather than foolish risks. "Incoming message for you, Jake," Kim announced. "It is from your sister on Earth." Jake accepted the call, and Lisa Martinez's face appeared on the screen. She looked older than he remembered, but her smile was the same one that had inspired him to become a better person. "Hey, little brother," she said. "I just wanted to call and tell you how proud I am. I have been following the news about your rescue station. Mom and Dad would have loved to see this." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I wish they were here to see it too." "They are," Lisa said softly. "Every time you help someone, every time you choose to do the right thing, they are right there with you." After the call ended, Jake found himself thinking about the path that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a lonely salvager with no purpose beyond paying his bills. Now he was part of something bigger, a movement that was changing. How the galaxy thought about helping others. "Captain Martinez," Dr. Nithara called from her station. We have received the quarterly report from the Galactic Rescue Coordination Center. You might find it interesting. Jake looked at the data with growing amazement. Rescue response times were down by 60% across known space. The number of ships participating in rescue operations had increased by over 300%. Most remarkably, the death rate from space emergencies had dropped to the lowest level in recorded history. These numbers represent thousands of lives saved, Dr. Nithera said quietly, all because one person chose to answer a call for help. Jake shook his head. It was not just me. It was all of us working together. Humans teaching aliens to take risks. Aliens teaching humans to think ahead. We are stronger together than either of us ever was alone. The communication system chimed again, and Lieutenant Commander Kim looked up with excitement. Jake, you are going to want to hear this. We just received a message from the edge of the Andromeda sector. A survey ship is trapped in a quantum storm, and they are specifically requesting assistance from the Martinez Rescue Station. Jake grinned. The station had been named after him despite his protests, and he was still getting used to the fame. How far out are they? 12 hours at maximum speed. It will be dangerous. Quantum storms are unpredictable, and we will be operating at the edge of our range. Jake was already suiting up. Prep the rescue ship. Let Captain Veltar know we have a mission. Are you sure? Kim asked. This one is really risky. The storm could shift and trap us too. Jake paused in his preparations, thinking about the question. A year ago, he would have calculated the odds and probably decided the risk was too great. But that was before he learned what happened when good people chose to do nothing. There are people out there who need help, he said simply. That is all the reason I need. As the rescue ship launched from the station, Jake reflected on how much had changed. He was no longer the only person willing to answer desperate calls. There were hundreds of rescue stations across the galaxy now, staffed by people who believed that no one should face death alone in the darkness of space. But there were still emergencies that others could not or would not handle. There were still impossible rescues that required someone willing to risk everything for strangers, and as long as there were people in need, Jake Martinez would be there to answer their calls. Behind him, the research station continued its work, a bright light in the darkness where once there had been only death. Ahead of him, a quantum storm raged around a trapped ship whose crew was probably giving up hope. Jake smiled and pushed his engines to full power. Hope was about to arrive.